In 2008, you received an award, the Companion of the Order of Australia, for your work in politics. What was the driving force behind such a long and dedicated career in politics?
The main reason why I stayed in politics for so long is that there were a number of things I wanted to do to make Australia a stronger and more prosperous and prouder country, and I had the opportunity, because I was Prime Minister for more than 11 years, to bring about a lot of change. And when I left office, Australia was very strong economically and well respected internationally, and it was that more than anything else that kept me in politics and kept me going.
Today, many young men grow up in fatherless families. Through divorce, the role model of a father is critical to the journey into manhood. You lost your own father at the age of 16 and became Father of the Year in 1997. How were you able to ensure balance between work and family?
You can always achieve a balance between work and family if you try. Not only politics takes people away from their family for extended periods of time, the important thing is that when you are with your family, with your children, you make it plain to them that they are the most important people in your life. Children have an instinctive sense of security or insecurity, and if children know they are loved and cared for and their welfare is the most important thing for their parents, then even though their parents may on occasions be interstate or overseas, it doesn't really break the bond or alter their lives.
Could you expand about John Carrick, your personal hero? You said he told you politics was a battle of ideas, not PR.
Yeah, well, John, who was the General Secretary of the Liberal Party, later went on to become leader of the government in the Senate during the Fraser government coalition years. He had been a prisoner of war of the Japanese in World War II. He taught me more about politics than anybody else, and what he quite rightly identified was that it's ideas and values that matters in politics far more than how much media coverage you receive or how popular you may be at a particular time, but it's winning the argument about values and ideas that matters far more than anything else.
In 1999, your government negotiated the Motion of Reconciliation with Aboriginal Senator Aidan Ridgway. You did not support the 2007 Parliamentary Sorry by then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. You did offer a personal apology before the Bringing Them Home report was published, saying, "I'm sorry for the hurt and trauma I many feel and continue to feel as a consequence of actions of past generations." Why has your personal apology been overlooked in view of a parliamentary apology?
Well, you really have to ask my critics the explanation for that. I thought that our treatment of Indigenous people in the earlier years was poor and was one of the most blemished parts of our history, but I equally had reservations about the Bringing Them Home report. I thought there were flaws in it, but there was never any doubt that I wanted to achieve a better standard of living and greater opportunities for Indigenous people, and I saw the path forward to that being a path of giving practical assistance in improving the education, employment and health facilities of Indigenous people.
My friend Damajar Jordila thinks that sorry means nothing to him. He said, "Our laws have been the same for thousands of years. You change your laws whenever it suits you." Damajar is 24 years old and lives in Maningrida in the Northern Territory. He also said that he felt the intervention policy did not have consultation and the human rights laws were overturned to ensure the policy came about. Most of all, he said that it was a blanket policy that did not take into account individual circumstances. The Rudd-Gillard government continued this policy. What do you feel can be done to enable this policy to be lifted?
Well, I'm not in favour of lifting the policy because my government brought it in. I thought it was more important to protect children who were being abused than anything else, and that was also the view of other Indigenous leaders such as Noel Pearson, so I have a different view from that of your friend.
In 2000 you implemented the GST. This was a much debated issue. 11 years on, do you feel it was a good decision?
Oh yes, very good decision. People no longer question the wisdom of that decision. They now look back on it and see it as a major piece of economic reform, and nobody advocates getting rid of it, nobody advocates going back. Everybody now sees it as being a very successful example of the government implementing a difficult reform.
In October 2001, the Children Overboard affair was an Australian political controversy. There was an accusation that asylum seekers threw their children overboard to secure rescue and passage to Australia. Criticisms were made of your government. How do you feel about the situation now?
Well, what happened there was that there was originally a report that some children had been thrown overboard, and it was subsequently demonstrated that that report was inaccurate, and that was acknowledged and accepted. The main reason why people supported my government then was not because of the allegations about children overboard, but because we had a policy that effectively stopped illegal immigration, and that the strength of that policy has been demonstrated in recent months, where boats have come on almost a daily basis, and the Australian public thinks that the current government made a big mistake reversing our policies. What was exercising people's minds then was how to stop the boats coming, not so much whether individual asylum seekers had thrown children overboard in order to win admission to our country.
Your government increased border protection and refugee boat people arrivals came down. The current government's policy has resulted in an increase of refugees, and sadly we also saw the recent tragedy on Christmas Island, where about 30 boat people drowned. How should Australia create a balance between our obligation to assist refugees and our ability to support them?
Well, we shouldn't allow people to come here except in an authorised fashion, and under our policy that's what we had achieved. We had a big migrant intake. We also took 12,000 refugees a year under a humanitarian program. And I think the present government made a big mistake changing our policy, and they really encouraged people to undertake hazardous journeys, and I'm not blaming the government for that terrible tragedy before Christmas, but I do argue that if we had not relaxed the policy and changed it, then there would be less incentive for people to try and come to Australia in the first place.
You were in Washington in 2001 when the 9/11 occurred. Did that affect your decision for sending the troops to the Middle East?
Not directly. My presence in Washington on the 11th of September certainly had an impact on my understanding of how the Americans felt about the attack and how they felt more broadly about
experience.
It
was like a first-hand experience.
Well, it was certainly a first-hand experience, yes, although I wasn't personally affected by it, but it certainly was, and it gave me an opportunity to absorb immediately the reaction of the American people.
After the Bali bombings in 2002, you asked the Australians to wrap their arms around the people of Indonesia and remain strong, free and tolerant. And in 2003, you said you had to make the hardest decision of your political career, for Australia to join the multinational force in Iraq. Why was this such a hard decision to make?
Well, it was a hard decision to make because there was a lot of international criticism of it, and there were a lot of people in Australia who didn't agree with it. And it's easier sometimes to take decisions that everybody supports, decisions a lot of people don't support. And on the evidence at the time, the majority of people did not support that decision. They're always much harder.
In 2006, you announced the $96 billion debt was paid off. This debt was inherited from the previous Labor government. It took 10 years to achieve economic reform. You then lost your seat at the Liberal Party, and the Liberal Party lost the election in 2007. Kevin Rudd and the Labor Party came into power. Do you feel that your efforts to recover the Australian economy were in vain due to the Rudd-Gillard government's spending?
Well, I think the Rudd-Gillard government has squandered the gains that we made, and the very strong position we had financially has been squandered in large measure by the subsequent government. And of course the strong position we had meant that we were in a much better position Australia was, to withstand the economic downturn.
My father was one of the installers, and he saw not only the installers but the customers wanting to rip off the system. He did not want to make a lot of money out of it because he wanted to do the right thing. This policy did irretrievable damage to my family's livelihood. My uncle now works full-time on repairing the damage made by cowboy installers. For the current government, 3,500 homes have been affected at a cost of $1,500 per home, using 3 qualified tradesmen to complete the works. If you had been in power at the time of the GFC, what would you have done?
Well, we certainly wouldn't have wasted money on many of the programs, and there was an enormous amount of mismanagement and waste in relation to the school building program, the Pink Bats installation scheme of which you spoke. There was a case for some stimulus, but nowhere near as much as the government undertook. It was far too extravagant. A lot of it was misdirected, and a lot of it was inefficiently spent.
I have friends living with disabilities. Can you tell me how your government improved the lives of people with disabilities and their carers? Do you feel that the intent deinstitutionalisation policy was fulfilled?
Well, we had a number of changes which boosted the opportunities for people to get respite care, and in a number of other areas we improved opportunities for carers. We introduced on a near regular basis a one-off payment, in some cases 2 payments to people who were carers, depending on the intensity of the care required by the person being looked after. We began to announce those payments in budgets as far back as 2001, and they then became a regular feature. And the present government has continued that practice, and that's a good thing. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and there's now discussion being undertaken about whether there should be some kind of special national scheme to look after people who are carers, and there's certainly a case to have a look at that. I would want to know all the ramifications of it, but a lot has been done, but more needs to be done. It's a very difficult situation for many people who, through pure misadventure and no fault of their own, their lives are radically altered by the need to care for a loved one, and if they don't have the money, it is a burden, and not only a financial burden but a very severe emotional burden as well.
What legacy do you feel you've left the Australian people? What are your greatest defeats and your greatest achievements in your eyes?
Well, legacies are always things for others to judge. I tried to leave Australia a stronger, prouder, more prosperous country. I made my share of mistakes, but I had my share of successes, and I think it is right to say that Australia was a stronger, prouder, more prosperous country in November of 2007 than it had been when I became Prime Minister, and as the last 3 years have gone by, I suspect that more people agree with that proposition now than agreed with it 3 years ago.
Now that you are not going to be Vice President of the International Cricket Council, what are your plans for the future?
Oh, I enjoy life and talking to people, visiting other countries, making speeches, looking after my family. I've got plenty to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very much.